This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, Joey and Aaron talk about engaging in generational wars.
In Spain, we call it soledad. This is what Joey sounds like. I'm not going to go anymore because I don't speak Spanish.
Well, you are what the French call les incompetents. This is what an Aaron sounds like. So I got you. I'm here with you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Big shout out to executive producer and not here right now, Jess Vander, because she is not here right now.
Silent whoop whoop. Yes. Rate,
house
review,
is clean.
subscribe. No, it's so messy. It's on fire. Clean it. Subscribe to it, please. Yeah, do that. That'd be
5 stars.
great. Yeah.
Hold on. Let me grab this.
Ooh,
Aaron,
notebooks. Mm-hmm.
can I ask you a question?
I guess. I suppose.
I guess.
Mhm.
As we've talked about, contending with being an old, emerging, our emergence of being olds. There's been a lot of recent conversations, both in our company and externally in the memosphere, etc. I saw one recently about millennials love GIFs and they have to stop, or why they're so cringe, or if you need to use GIFs, here are ones that are like Gen Z approved and things like that.
Mhm.
Or the fact that socks that are
ankle
hidden within
socks.
your
Mhm.
shoes are
Mhm.
no longer approved.
Mhm.
And I was trying to think back of like, did our generation have the sort of generational war with Gen Xers? Like, I couldn't really remember it, and I often felt like I didn't want to be like grouped into being a millennial and then like spoken for as part of like a group, although like today it seems to be a bit different. And so my question for you is, how does one engage in a generational war?
Yeah, I mean, I'll caveat most of my answers under the assumption that like this is an online war, not a like in-person war. Like I don't hear anybody of any generations actually engaging in these ideas offline. So I my assumption is that this is one of those vestiges of our internet culture. Um, but I do think that like millennials, unfortunately, or perhaps in a good way, who knows, we're very, very obsessed more than anything with that like kidulting, adulting, turning adulting into a verb. Like there was a crisis of growing up that millennials experienced that can be pretty cringe for a lot of other people and can be really annoying, because we were in that age group where we're like dealing with a lot of life milestones being out of our reach. And so we're like trying to redefine them and feel comfortable with the fact that like we're never going to own a house or like whatever. Like there were so many things that we were contending with. And we never really got over it, partially because we're kind of in Groundhog Day culturally in a lot of ways. Like culture used to, it seemed like there were leapfrogs in culture that were more dramatic and more pointed in the past. And now they're obviously culture's still changing, but like there's certain political things that are still the same. Like we're still talking about Joe Biden. We're talking about Joe Biden for like forever, for like 16 years, like as long as I can remember, we've been talking about Joe Biden. So like there are little signals like that. I'm not trying to get political yet. There are little signals like that I think sometimes make millennials forget that they have grown up a long time ago, and being a kid or like wishing you were young is very cringe. And on the flip side of that, like we're not, from a marketing perspective, like ain't nobody gonna talk about us in about 5 more years. Like this is actually, I think, as much as anything, just an outcome of millennials are creeping closer to the age at which we are not a generation that's talked about in the same way that spending power gets talked about anyone who's between 21 and 40. Like, that's the age group that you talk about. So, like, Gen X doesn't get talked about nearly as much as they did 15 years ago. Boomers do, but not in the ways in marketing circles that we often talk about. And so it's my long-winded way of maybe not answering your question of what weapons do we bring, but more so recontextualizing the idea that, like, I think that millennials already lost the war, perhaps for good reasons, and their weapons should be just a little less cringe and a lot more shut the fuck up. Maybe. That's where I land.
Oh, what has been interesting is that, like, more than anything, the conversations, being in the office in New York, there are, like, many Gen Z folks in our office, but like, what's interesting is I've seen people in their, like, later 30s being like, oh, you can't do that anymore. And I'm like, why? Do you like that thing? Like, then you should keep doing it. Like, but it also makes me think about, like, what is the relevance of these, like, sort of generational orientations, right? It is, like, theoretically about a shared mindset based on some shared lived experience, but, like, the rate of change, like, I don't know what, like, determinately, like, from 1996, like, that is when a moment changed, just feels like sort of absurd, and like, there is a bit of, like, tilting at windmills and having some conversation about, like, if or how you should wear your socks, and you like, being able to be surrounded by both young people and middle-aged and late middle-aged people in, like, friend groups and surroundings is kind of amusing, in that, like, you'll hear, like, middle and late middle-aged people be like, oh, like, I wore that a while ago, like, that was not, like, Jinkos and spaghetti straps, like, whatever, like, those types of ideas, or Sambas, like, being, like, the it girly shoe again, and being like, oh, that was, like, the it girly shoe, like, a long time ago, or whatever. Like, the interest in it as, like, a narrative topic is more sort of questionable to me than actually, like, like, what generation do you identify with based on your sock length or something. Is just like, it's kind of, who cares?
I totally agree. I mean, I think that we also have more permeability between generations than we did in generations past. I think that's one aspect of it. Meaning that, like, you can peer in and you can just go online and see, like, oh, people of that age are using these words. And that also coincides with the fact that generations are just an outcrop of media and marketing. Like, these names and titles for generations are always, they're just another manifestation of us trying to organize what is otherwise completely iterative and is not actually, like, structured in any meaningful way. So, like, we as various industries, we just sort of sit around and we're like, you know what? Yeah, let's put the marker here. Let's say it's this decade, these 20 years. Yep. You know what we'll call it? We'll call it Gen Alpha, because we have to do a report, and hopefully a lot of people read our report when we call them Gen Alpha, and that's what we'll call them. The reason I'm bringing up both of those things is because, like, this is why I say, in many ways, it's a manifestation of something online. Like, it's not a real thing. I think that the differences between people are true, and there is such a thing as culture and stuff like that, clearly. And, like, cultural codes that people follow to decide what is cool or not, or in or not. But on the same token, I think that I'm always interested to see in what's going to happen as millennials get older. Like, as millennials become the age, as millennials gain 20 years from now, are we going to be having conversations about Gen Alpha versus Gen Z? Or are we going to be having, like, oh, we need to disrupt the elder care system because we're about to go into it. So like, let's pull out all of our
more
old
Medicaid,
tricks.
more Medicaid.
Yes. So, okay. So I don't know. Do you think that there's really like, well, what do you think is underneath it? Why do you think, I guess this kind of gets to what you were just saying. Why do you think people are so fascinated with it? Is it my cynical thing of just like, it plays with media and ad dollars very well? Or is there something else going on?
Well, I think to your point, like where many of these things started out was like the world of sociology and was like an academic pursuit, and then was adopted by like marketing and advertising as a means of being like, this sort of realm has like some set of shared experiences and value sets by being in proximity to each other. But like the speed and the sort of ability to be in smaller cohorts that are sort of like more culturally oriented online, like I don't know what are like the shared value sets of Gen Z. Like I don't know, it's like what are the shared value sets of like goth interested K-pop fans in like the Western, like Northwestern US. Like maybe that is like more compelling, but I don't know that you get the same the ability of like the fracturing of the mediascape changes the way that like your shared experience in content, in values, in sort of even like political orientations, any of those things aren't as shared anymore. But the other part of it is like the willingness to identify it. Like I don't remember my parents ever being like, I'm a baby boomer. Like I don't think they cared. Or I mean, they're at like they're in like a fake or like a mini group called the Joneses from 1960 to 66. So I don't know. You're like, but the like I don't remember Gen X being like, we're Gen X, but like there is something interesting of like our use of it in more like narrative publications, media, like everywhere sort of forces you into it. And then there's like, oh, I guess my tribe is like being a Gen Z, or my tribe is being this thing. And that part feels weird because like you said, it like, where is the imbued meaning in it? Like, where is the sort of like affinity outside of just like, I happen to be born in a year between these like arbitrary windows,
Yes. I think that people like to feel seen, period. I think it's always true. And I do think that there's something really powerful when you see like millennial and it's like, ooh, that's me, as opposed to just like adults in their 30s to 40s or whatever it is. So I think that there's one element of that. I think another element is that the importance of life stage, like, you and I have both done lots of generation studies in the past, and I've done them, like, I've done probably 5 different types of generational studies in the past 15 years. And so the conversation that always starts and the conversation that has to come up is what characteristics are attributable to life stage versus like generation, this mythical generation thing. And can you isolate those two things in a meaningful way? To start to surmise what are the things that are unique to this group that existed and that grew up in these age ranges, or had major major cultural events happen to them at certain ages as they continued to age. And it always we always land on the fact that like you can't pull those things apart. And it sort of immediately starts to break down the notion of generations anyway, because it becomes a history exercise. You're always trying. Next thing you know, you have to go back. If you don't want to just borrow sociological frameworks, by the way, you should. You don't need to start from scratch. That's very dumb. But when you do, and you start to plot major economic, geopolitical, and to a lesser degree, cultural milestones, and you look at those major ones that shifted the world and shifted the relationship between people, yeah, that's why we ended up with the silent generation and boomers. because we were talking about World War II. Like, that is a thing that allowed such a clear change from the way that one group lived to another. To your point about generations that, you know, started to be branded or started to like identify with it. I don't know that I know any of my parents' friends or my parents. They never talk about being boomers. And I would argue that they don't see much of themselves when there's content about boomers, but they know that they are quote unquote boomers. Same thing with my older brother. Like, my brother wouldn't ever really describe himself as Gen X. He is Gen X. But there's obviously like the marketing demographic of Gen X, which is like heroin chic, Marc Jacobs, Chasing Amy. Like there's a
lumberjack hipsters. Yeah.
That takes me to early millennial. Those lumberjack. I was just talking to somebody about, let's go to the mixology bar and throw on our leather strapped suspenders and go sauntering in with our twirly mustaches. But with all of that, I think perhaps a lot of these like wars and debates stoke that thought of like, which of these things is going to be embarrassing to us later? I think that like underrides all of it. Like, grandpa, you wear ankle socks. I'm literally wearing ankle socks right now. I have no problem wearing them. I am not. These kids don't understand tan lines. They need to figure that shit out. I'm just saying. But let me get off my soapbox yelling at Cloud.
Quickly yell at Cloud.
Yes. Point being, I think that a part of aging in a society in which you can constantly look at everything that everyone else is doing means that for some, they choose to constantly be monitoring when they are going to get disregarded, pushed aside. When you go from being the audience that is always spoken to the one that's the afterthought and only gets talked to when we're talking about depends and like pill cases, I was going to say, but we were talking about millennial pill cases very recently. So I think that I would surmise, and I'd love to hear from some Gen Zers. We should bring in more from the office to talk about this. But like, is there a little bit of an element of just defining oneself and also think future nostalgia about just getting ready to be like, oh God, remember when you did this spaghetti straps? Oh, that was so cringe. Because it happens to everybody. That's just how it is.
There's something about maybe in like this instance, and maybe you feel it too, or maybe push back, is I think the thing that feels different is like the policing of cool. Which I think is more a product of the, very online social media, like TikTok, Instagram type of world where you're like getting hit with these things over and over again. And the idea of like, like this type of meme is cool and this isn't, and this sock and this shoe and this drink and this like water bottle and whatever, out of probably just like a desperate like attempt to be like holding on to whatever is cool in any moment, and that it is changing faster, like fashion cycles and things like that feel like they're going faster, Shein, whatever. And so I think maybe like policing those things is like a bit of a cool anxiety. And so if you can be like, well, at least I'm not using heavy block memes with words like this, then I'm like not a millennial, or like my socks are different, so I'm like still cooler than them. Which like also, by the way, like I don't begrudge, like I can understand the urge to just be like, to our conversation before we started of like being au courant, like just I'm of the moment, like I know, like I have my Sambas and I have my, loose pants and like whatever, like rugby shirt.
My loose pants. My loose pants.
Yeah.
So it makes me all current and cool. I'm wearing my loose pants. I think that we're just getting more visibility into something that happens with every generation. I think the policing of cool. I think that youth determines what is cool. Youth culture always determines what's cool. Always. Period. And I just think that in this day and age, we all get to see more of the conversation that happens around the policing of that cool. And by being present in that conversation, there are new lines that are drawn that are just like, yeah, no, that thing that you might still think is cool, not cool. And, you know, I think that that's also a part of, this goes back to this life staging thing. Because like this, what's the book? We'll put it in the show notes. There's a book that was written, I want to say in the 70s. It's all about 7-Up and marketing uncool and like borrowing counterculture of the 60s to define what 7-Up would be and how that brand would be so distinctive. And also a lot of the like the dangers but new conventions that came from cultural marketing. That's what it's all about. And I think that like the decision of what is cool has to be it's less a conversation of what's cool and uncool, and it's more about defining identity. And I think, to your point, not only is culture moving so fast that things fall in and out of favor very quickly, and so there's a sensitivity and an anxiety, like an urgency to figure out what it is right now. There's also an internationality about it. Like, people are able to borrow from so many other cultures around the globe that have their own indicators of cool. And if I can throw one more like complicating factor into it, we also have more awareness of we have a greater awareness of the dangers and limits and realities of cultural appropriation. Like, we're not good at it. We're not good at avoiding it as a collective. But there is greater awareness of it now than there was 15 years ago. And more than anything, I think that plays into that policing. There's just like, there is, if you are going to define your identity based on codes that you are seeing from others that are changing all the time, you are probably constantly looking for feedback as to whether or not the decisions you're making are working or not. And I do think that that's a unique plight of youth. That is the nature of being young, of being around really diverse and broad groups of people in schools, in different types of workplaces, like all that sort of thing. And I think as your nucleus, as your nuclear family starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller until it's you and your dog whose tail is twitching, thumping the wall a lot. I don't think anybody can hear that, but it's really cute. Yeah. It's very, very cute. I think that you have to go through the exercise of what is your relationship to these boundaries of cool. Do you, and I think we're kind of getting at this, I think that millennials are not into being uncool. We can sort of like make that part clear. And that's why I think that we're seeing new behaviors and a new sensitivity for even what middle age will look like, and eventually what seniors and retirement is going to look like, just because we're so much more self-critical as a generation, millennials are.
As you were talking about it, it made me wonder too, because there's like some of these ideas of like the flattening of culture based on the speed and like a global orientation of a lot of these social media things. And I was realizing, like, when I was went to Paris on vacation with my family, like just picking out like one example of it, of like shoes. It was like women from the US that I was seeing like on vacation, women from like France or other European countries, and like Asian women were wearing either those like New Balance shoes with like the heel that sticks out and is like a little bit pointier, or Sambas. Like it was like, but it was not, it wasn't like the American thing or like a New York, LA thing. It was just like and so there's like this flattening of subcultures, it feels like.
Oh yeah.
Not to say that they don't exist by any means, but it is like in the way that like language and like certain like smaller group spoken languages are disappearing, but like you're seeing it in like fashion, right? Like I was not expecting to see that when I was there,
I find it really interesting in fashion and in music when it comes to just the geographic generational consistency. Like there's absolutely an international class, I would probably call them, which tend to be very Western, like very American, European, and then increasingly Asian as well, where there are style and musical signifiers that are really shared back and forth and back and forth. And this goes into Latin America as well, for sure. But it's like major
international pop or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like huge cities, and it's people that maybe don't even travel to all those cities, but you live in a big international city. Because you are going to be seeing those codes from all those places, you are more likely to like experience that sort of consistency across them. And I love it because it almost allows me to see like how many other types of ways of being there are. Because like I'll be candid, like I notice when I go to like bars and restaurants and different. I was in Vancouver last week, and I was like, oh, some of these outfits look a lot like what I'm wearing right now. Like there's a lot of that. Or I was in Amsterdam, and I'm like, this feels a lot like home. This is weird. And I think that this is getting very far away from, I guess, the crux of this being generational. But I do think that being able to pay attention to the things that make you feel a part of something or separated from something, I don't think that goes away. I think that that's a human trait. That is where we are searching for safety and acceptance.
I think you're right. I think like the othering to in yourself, right, is probably like what this all boils down to. Like, and in this case, being in it like is just being like cool. So if you're othering, you know, whatever, millennials or people of a certain age, to be able to in yourself as like the like it guy or it girly right now, then you're like, great, those socks are dumb. Anyways, I got it. You know?
Yes. You know, I would say, I believe you'll agree with me on this. I would consider everything that you just said a pita. It's kind of like a wrap-up corner, you know, but it's like a little bit different, but it fits in there. It's a pocket. It's a pita pocket. It's a pita pocket corner, and I think we did it, and I think it worked really well. It's wrap adjacent. It's breaded. It's tasty, and it's probably for a non-breakfast meal. Agreed.
Great.
We did it. I would say
we did. Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by Chunky Wedge, the newest Chunky Wedge footwear from sneaker maker. Why did it sound like that? Yes, that was that.
As always, we'd like to thank our executive producer and Make 7 Up Yours, Jess Vander.
May we also thank sound engineer and that really got me, international globetrotter Alex Contel.
Oh man, we're out of order. We'd like to thank programming coordinator and man about town, Les Jacobs.
Yes, and can we please thank the amazing creative and production support team of Nora Mestrich and Sarah Jacobs. Fuck, I do this every time. Sarah Gilbert. I'm sorry, Sarah. I do this every time. I know your last name. I've known you for 8 years. I know your name.
As always, thanks, Elen. Special thanks. Control? The video game Control?
Oh, it's great. Oh, Control is so good.
It's so good.
Okay, because I've played it twice. I played it on PS4, then I played it on PS5, the upgraded version. Love it. It has a little bit less lag. It still does that. Other special thanks, System Shock. So, precursor to BioShock, it was a PC game a long time ago. They did a remaster and re-released it last year. It is really good. It is an incredibly good game. If you've ever played any of the BioShock franchises and you've never played System Shock, you gotta play it. It is very frustrating. It is not easy, but all of the DNA is there, and it feels like a BioShock sequel that we don't yet have, although BioShock 4 is ostensibly a couple years around the corner. So, fingers crossed.
It's coming. Well, thanks, video games. And
indeed.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Joey.
Bye.
Bye.